From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. The big USDA crop production report last week is seen as a game changer for the market, but is $5 corn in the cards again?
If the funds continue to pump money into the long side of the market, it'll be just the exact opposite of what we saw in 2024 when they built a record short position.
Even with the recent run-up, farmers are still looking for ways to cut costs in 2025.
As we talk to growers, we talk about phosphorus and potassium. Maybe some of those rates can be cut back.
But which fertilizer is poised to see the most price pressure heading into spring? And we introduce you to a barn hero.
Just be humble and then learn. Never stop learning, never stop caring for this. With a lot of work and a lot of patience, you can accomplish a lot.
Now for the news, USDA releasing guidelines for farmers when it comes to producing climate-smart crops for use as biofuels, and it's viewed as favorable for farmers. USDA's interim final rule covers technical guidelines on how climate-smart ag crops can be used as biofuels feedstocks. This includes a carbon intensity calculator that Secretary Tom Vilsack says incorporates the GREET model and will help farmers earn a premium from these practices under what's called 45Z. He's also confident they've paved the way for the incoming Trump administration.
Obviously, the next administration's got additional work to do, and the expectation, of course, would be that they will follow through on this. In addition to corn and soybeans, we now include sorghum. There are additional climate-smart agricultural practices, including reduced tillage and fertilizer application timing. As importantly, practices may be used individually or in combination. They are not required to be bundled.
Now, the interim final rule will have a 60-day comment period, and biofuels groups are still awaiting the release of the updated GREET model from the U.S. Treasury. It's been another grueling week for firefighters in Southern California, working to gain the upper hand on wildfires burning in the Los Angeles area. But CAL FIRE confirmed midweek crews were getting an upper hand on two of the state's most destructive fires ever. And while those have done a lot of damage in heavily populated areas, USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says some ag communities are being impacted as well.
As you move up into the hills, it's more sparsely populated, but there are some agricultural lands there, some ranch lands. And we saw that back in December with the Franklin fire that burned through some agricultural communities. And that has happened again. The damage is extensive to farm buildings, fencing, and to animals, unfortunately. And so we are dealing with some of the agricultural consequences in the far northern suburbs of Los Angeles with these large fires.
One avocado grower in the Palma Valley tells ABC News he lost about 50% of his crops due to the high Santa Ana winds. And new this week, the Federal Trade Commission says it's suing John Deere. The lawsuit accuses the company of unfair practices when it comes to repairs, but John Deere responding, vowing to vigorously defend itself. The FTC says the attorneys general of Illinois and Minnesota are joining in on the lawsuit. The complaint alleges that for decades, Deere has unlawfully limited the ability of farmers and independent repairers to fix Deere equipment, instead forcing farmers to rely on Deere's network of authorized dealers to make those necessary repairs. The suit claims through limited distribution of its repair tools, Deere has been able to control and limit who can repair its equipment, allowing it to maintain a 100% market share and charge higher prices.
In my practice, the FTC does not, bring complaints unless they feel like there are strong grounds to do so. And I would also note, that they were joined by two states in this matter. I believe it was Minnesota and the state of Illinois. And so I think that gives even further credence to the fact that we have a variety of enforcers who believe that this is a particular issue that's impacting the farming community.
Deere releasing a statement saying, quote, the lawsuit filed on the eve of a change in administration ignores the company's long-standing commitment to customer self-repair and the consistent progress and innovation we have made over time, end quote. In the statement, Deere highlighted the fact that FTC Commissioner Andrew Ferguson had a dissenting statement in the suit, which said the action, quote, appears to be the result of brazen partisanship, end quote, and appears, quote, taken in haste to beat President Trump into office, end quote. One Deere leader calling the lawsuit meritless and promised to vigorously defend itself. Earlier this week, Deere announced new capabilities that will be integrated into the John Deere Operations Center to allow producers more solutions for diagnosing and repairing equipment. It says the latest addition to Deere's suite of digital solutions will further help customers and independent repair technicians by enabling them to reprogram Deere manufactured electronic controllers.
That's it for the news. Well, a bit of a warm-up late this week, but we are bracing for some of the coldest air of the season this next week. It's going to be downright frigid. Just how cold are we going to get and how long will it stick around? That is a check of weather when we come back.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Pioneer. Plant Pioneer brand corn for a home field advantage and yields that beat the competition. With advanced genetics and traits to combat your toughest challenges, the Pioneer lineup of corn hybrids is your secret to a winning season. Your best year starts here.
Welcome back. Well, we're preparing for the coldest air of the season as we're watching what's called the Siberian Express. Meteorologist Jack Van Meter joining us now to tell you what to expect.
Taking a look at the current snowpack that's across the country, we're kind of looking at two separate things. First off, we're looking at the Rocky Mountain pack that's obviously going to be out to our west, starting down here. Actually, parts of New Mexico, actually northern parts of New Mexico, really shooting all the way up into portions of Washington State by the Olympics out there. And the main reason for that was the atmospheric rivers that we've been seeing the past couple of weeks, really carrying a lot of moisture. And as that moisture gets forced up a mountain, almost gets wringed out like a rag and deposited in those upper altitude places. That being said, we are still seeing a good bit of snowpack all the way from Kansas, stretching all the way to pretty much, we're looking at West Virginia there actually, from a couple systems that we saw, especially last week. And actually, this upcoming week, we are only looking at one more system to be moving through the country. But again, very, very light amounts of snow, pretty much from Kentucky going all the way up to parts of New York, especially New York City as well. Could be picking up maybe an inch or two over the next couple days. And of course, looking at some more Rocky Mountain snow as a little bit of moisture moves down from Canada. The big driver of our weather system is actually going to be the jet stream. What we're actually watching is a polar low starting to move down and really start to advect in or move in really cold and Arctic air. I've got the jet stream started today, and what we're noticing again are going to be these purples and parts of dark blues starting to move down, especially in parts of the Great Lakes states, and really digging and almost just hanging out for much of the beginning of the week. We're looking at low temperatures in this area actually going to be negative, and that'll be an actual air temperature and not a wind chill factor. What is behind this? Well, of course, it's going to be some warmer, more average temperatures as we are seeing some significant ridging out to our west. As that moves through slowly but surely, it's going to take a lot of energy to move out this cold air here in the U.S. Here's that temperature outlook, and as we can see, really, really cold temperatures will be expected that the week of the 21st all the way to the 25th. Again, it's all going to be that deep, deep low that's starting to dig. And we're going to be seeing below temperatures all the way from San Antonio going up to New York City. And of course, national championship game in Atlanta on Monday will be affected. High temperature during that game going to be right around 32 degrees.
Thanks, Jack. Well, last week's USDA reports were seen as a game changer for the market. But just how much higher could this market actually go? Brian Grady and Chip Nellinger join me to break down the markets right after the break. Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. Well, Brian Grady and Chip Nellinger joining us on the show to talk about the markets. All right, last week, analysts on the show told Michelle Rook that the latest USDA crop production report, that it was really a game changer for the markets. We've now seen how the markets reacted. How long do you think that the markets will keep trading those revisions from USDA last week, Brian?
Well, it's a game changer, especially for the corn market, because now we're borderline tight in terms of ending stocks and what's projected. The stocks to use ratio went from above average to now average and borderline sub average. And so that does change the script some. I think the key moving forward is going to be money flow. We saw a lot of money flow out of huge short positions at the end of 2024, and now they're building length as we move into 2025. And so the fund money flow is going to be critical here.
Yeah, Chip, I mean, we know a lot of farmers sold possibly corn on Monday, also last Friday, also Tuesday. We've seen a lot of corn get sold with this rally. Do you think that there's a lot left?
I do think there's a lot left. I think farmers, rightfully so, especially the areas that were blessed with record yields. It's kind of a windfall since the USDA report and the cut in yields and carryout. So I do think farmers rewarded it very strongly. Probably more movement since the report day than there was even, in the gut of harvest. I do think that we've kind of digested most of that bullish report. I think it boils down now to what Brian said: money flow. Funds are long 300,000 plus contracts of corn. So I think that they're a long way towards digesting that. And it probably boils down to rainfall and weather to end the season in both Brazil and Argentina, and then what that second crop corn season looks like for Brazil in the next couple of 3-4 months ahead.
Yeah, and we saw CONAB come out with some revisions. They actually raised their estimate, but they're still below a lot of estimates out there. We saw Michael Cordonier make some changes. So as we see these changes, no matter how minor they are, come out of Brazil and out of Argentina, do you think that the market is paying attention to that?
I think they definitely are paying attention to the weather forecast. I mean, you can see that when they take the rain out and there's no rain in the forecast, 100-degree temperatures in Argentina, the market rallies sharply, led by beans. And then here mid to late week, they've added some rain back, and you're seeing a correction in the bean market. So I think they're very much focused on Argentina, especially. I think Brazil's a record crop. Is it 165? Is it 170? It's still going to be a massive crop in Brazil, but they're very focused and highly attuned to the rainfall over the next couple of weeks in Argentina, in my opinion.
Yep, Brian, Chip mentioned it. It is still a massive crop in Brazil. Do farmers need to keep that in mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's kind of a foregone conclusion at this point in time. The question is crop quality coming out of central Brazil, because if it continues to rain, if that persists for another couple of weeks, the crop quality is going to be hurt even more. And that may become an issue, but size of the crop is huge in Brazil. Keep in mind, on the corn side of things, about 3/4 of Brazil's corn production is safrinha. So that's planted after the soybean harvest. And so a lot of the corn crop production in Brazil is yet to be told. We haven't even gotten to that planting season yet.
Yeah, keeping an eye on that safrinha corn crop. Okay, Brian, real quick, do you think $5 corn is in the cards again?
I do, as long as the funds continue to buy, and I think that that's the critical thing. We'll see pauses in here as the farmer sells, but if the funds continue to pump money into the long side of the market, it'll be just the exact opposite of what we saw in 2024 when they built a record short position.
Chip, do you think $5 corn is in the cards again?
I think March futures probably not. Potentially May. I could see the July. I think it comes down to what Brian said earlier. This second crop corn in Brazil is critical to the tightness of the world carryout in corn. So if they have a big crop on a lot of acres, it probably caps us. If they have any threat or perceived threat, you could easily see $5. But in my opinion, it's a bet on that weather during the second crop corn season in Brazil.
Well, as Trump is set to take office, what impact could tariffs have? Plus, we need to get into the feeder cattle market. We'll do all of that right after the break. Welcome back. Chip Nellinger and Brian Grady joining us again. All right, Chip, inauguration set for Monday. Let's just say that Trump announces tariffs on day 2 of his administration. Do you think that takes the wind out of these markets, or do you think that is already baked in?
Well, I think a lot of it's baked in. I think it depends on, obviously, the response, right? Not so much the tariffs, but the response. I've said for a while that Brazil bean crop is big enough. China really doesn't have to buy any beans from us, tariffs or no tariffs. So I think it depends on whether they continue to take the beans that they've already bought and purchased, They have been recently buying beans. And before the break, Brian mentioned that there's some quality issues maybe in the wetter area of central northern Brazil. And so I think it's the response to the tariffs. I think immediately it might be seen as a little bit negative, but I think we've traded that. It probably depends on whether China washes out of a bunch of beans in retaliation on the purchases that they've made up to this point.
Hey, Brian, we are hearing some huge corn acreage estimates this year. And I don't know where Pro Farmer sets right now, but let's just say that we have 95 million plus acres of corn again. What would that do, or corn this year? What would that do to the market?
Well, first off, the market is trying to buy corn acres at the moment. So I think, corn is trying to buy acres not only from soybeans, cotton, spring wheat, you name it. The corn market is winning at the moment. And so if that changes or not into spring will be the big question. But if we do get, let's say, the number you threw out there, 95 million acres, I think that's probably high on corn at the moment. But if we would get there, then you're looking at a situation where we go from borderline tight on supplies as we move through the 24-25 marketing year here, the second half of it, to something that would be sufficient again as we move forward if we don't have some sort of a weather issue during summertime.
Yeah, Chip, you agree with that?
I do. I would agree. I think beans, since the USDA report last Friday, have made it a little more interesting. They kind of caught up to corn, but I think you'd have to push November beans up towards 1080, 1090, just shy of $11 to maybe swing a lot of those acres out of corn. But regardless of what the number is or the March intentions report, it's all about Mother Nature. You still have to raise the crop, and there's all kinds of questions and drought talk already about the U.S. Summer. So to me, it comes down to Mother Nature during the growing season.
Brian, the corn rally, we know that it can impact the feeder market with the prospect of rising feed costs. But is there any indication that the feeder market is set to top?
Well, what we know about the cattle market is very cyclical. What we've seen is the cycle highs have been extended longer than what is typical the last two times now, including the current time. And we also know that when major tops are put in the cattle market, that you see a pretty significant downside correction. So I think that we probably have a chance to move to all-time highs in the cattle market as we move into early 2025. Thereafter, a lot of it will depend on demand and therefore and how the market reacts to that, because demand is the key component. We know the supply side of things. The Mexican feeder cattle situation, we are going to see Mexican feeder cattle move back across the border here again pretty soon in all likelihood. And so you'll alleviate some of that, but we still have a supply issue in the United States. So this all comes down to demand.
Yeah, and we'll get an updated cattle inventory report at the end of the month. The assumption is we have not started to rebuild this cattle herd yet. But Chip, what do you think? Can we see higher cattle prices?
I do think so. I think if you look at a chart, technically they look a little bit toppy. But to Brian's point, you have to stay high enough, long enough to choke demand off. Now, there's some early indications that maybe the exports are starting to slow down, but domestic demand still looks pretty strong. So could you have a $10 break and then still move into new highs? Absolutely. I think the volatility is going to be head spinning.
All right, Chip, Brian, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We need to take a quick break, and then we are checking in with Machinery Pete next.
You know, folks, any day that you get to talk about a John Deere 4020 diesel, that's a good day. And it's our lucky day today on Tractor Tales because that's what we're headed to Illinois to do.
1970 John Deere 4020 diesel power shift. It's like the tractor I learned to drive a tractor when I was 10, 11 years old, and the one I had then was a narrow front end. This is a wide front end, but narrow front ends are sort of hard to find now. I bought it from a lady in Springfield who her husband dug the basement on their new house with the tractor and loader on it. So it was beat up pretty bad when I got it, but I restored most of this between me and two other guys. We did most all of it. By the time we found a decent hood to put on it and some of the rest of the tin work, it was beat up pretty good. It learned me a lesson on restoring tractors. Our family always considered it a really handy chore tractor. This one's a later model, so it's got the console hydraulics and power shift transmission, and it's a diesel. 18 mile an hour would be about top speed. I've threatened to plow with it once or twice, but I didn't do it. We couldn't find a decent hood. So I ordered one from a aftermarket source, and we got it, and it looked like a gorilla had sat on it, during shipping. So he sent it back, and they said they all look like that. So we ended up taking this one to a really fine auto repair shop, and it took him over 6 months to pound the dents out of the front of it. The tires on this one look more like the originals. The new one's got such tall, deep lugs on them, where these are more old-fashioned, like what would have been on it originally.
Thanks, Greg. Well, as farmers look to cut costs in 2025, we surveyed growers to find out exactly where they plan to make cuts for this upcoming year. From searching for more generics to use to possibly cutting back on some fertilizer rates. We'll tell you what growers are planning on. That's next in our Farm Journal report.
You're watching U.S. Farm Report. Trusted, timely, tradition. Farm Journal Report on U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by CropLife America. CropLife America knows that the EPA's Endangered Species Act work plan may impact how you manage your fields and pest pressures. Learn more about what is changing and how CropLife is fighting for practical solutions at croplifeamerica.org/ESA.
Well, the latest USDA report was a bit of a game changer for the markets, and with the recent rally, it allowed farmers to sell some of their crop at better prices. But the reality is margins are still tight for 2025. And so where are farmers looking to cut back? That's what we explore in this weekend's Farm Journal report.
The theme that consumed the crop side of agriculture in 2024 was this: tighter margins, with farmers from coast to coast searching for ways to cut back.
It's no secret 2024 was a tough year, I think, across the U.S., and California was no different. A lot of the crops that we produce were under significant price constraints while costs were going up. So it was tough recipe for a lot of farmers.
That tough recipe also impacted farmers in the upper Midwest, as it could be a similar story for 2025.
Growers realize that the margins are very tight on corn and soybeans and also wheat. They are looking for places to intelligently cut.
AgWeb just completed a poll of farmers asking what cost-cutting measures they plan to implement on their farm this year. And the most glaring answer, machinery, with nearly 80% of farmers saying that's an area they're likely to cut.
Equipment's on the forefront of everyone's mind right now.
But machinery was also a place farmers cut back on in 2024. The latest Association of Equipment Manufacturers flash report shows sales of total farm tractors were down 13% last year. Combines fell 24%. And Casey Seymour says instead of a farmer buying a new planter or tractor, more are choosing to retrofit and upgrade what they have.
I'm an upgrade kit guy. I think that's the future of farming. As you look at what's going on, to me, it's one of those things where you can take and make new what you've got for a significant less amount of money. You can kind of take what you've got and make it new again.
According to the latest AgWeb poll, another area farmers say they plan to at least slow in 2025 is technology upgrades. 60% say it's likely, and only 9% said that decision is unlikely.
I think if you look at the last 5 years of how much technology has been put out into the marketplace, the amount of technology that got produced during that time frame was, epic.
Seymour says more farmers are working to home in on what they have when it comes to technology on the farm.
So they're looking at it going like, I don't really need to add a new gadget this year. Let's kind of figure out what we've got right now. Let's utilize those efficiencies. Let's get through 2025 and then let's take a look at 26 and see what we're going to do equipment-wise and technology-wise.
While equipment does seem to be an area in focus, the AgWeb poll found more farmers are adjusting their agronomic decisions based on how margins look today, with 61% saying they're likely to use generic products this year.
There are expensive programs and there are programs that either through generics or maybe chemistries that are been on the market a few years that may do just as good a job as some of the premium brand new programs. So that's definitely a place where growers can still get good weed control by smart shopping, looking at alternative herbicide programs.
But Hoffman says not all generics are created equal.
Well, that's a very confusing market. You really have to drill down and know what that active ingredient name is and what the percentage of active is.
Prices of key herbicides like glyphosate plummeted last year, and it's left farmers trying to navigate where prices go from here.
We're coming off a kind of a funky part of the cycle, obviously, where we had an excess of supply globally coming into the market.
Samuel Taylor is Rabobank's executive director of research of farm inputs for the entire North American market.
Cost prices were coming down as orders were cancelled, and we're coming into a market where the wholesale price for a lot of these active ingredients, which has to go through various stages before it gets to the farmer, had actually got to quite a low level on on the majority of our key active ingredients. So I think that farmers should see a fairly benevolent market for a lot of these active ingredients.
Herbicides may not be an area where farmers plan to cut back, but the AgWeb poll found 40% of farmers say they do plan on reducing fertilizer rates.
I think one of the first places that as we talk to growers, we talk about phosphorus and potassium. Maybe some of those rates can be cut back.
Hoffman says while farmers can cut back in some fields, he cautions against making cuts across the board.
Look at those soil tests, find those fields that are maybe in the non-responsive range and cut back, or don't put fertilizer P and K on some of those fields. Also, an option for fertilizer would be to look at a banded application. Banding that fertilizer closer to the plant row is going to be more effective than a broadcast. And that's going to allow you to cut back the rates also.
As farmers explore ways to save on costs, what's the outlook for fertilizer prices? Well, Taylor says potash prices are starting to creep up.
Potash generally seems quite plentiful, but there's probably a little bit of incremental upside on that. And I think you compare this a little bit towards the phosphates, which have been structurally high for a good period of time. There is a little bit of positive sentiment for growers about a greater availability in the North American market.
But Taylor says the reality is supplies on a global market are still tight, and countervailing duties have prevented some supplies from making it to the U.S. But one fertilizer product that could see more supply this year is nitrogen.
If there's any downside pricing pressure, it's probably more likely on the ammonia over the coming 6 months, where you could see some wholesale correction in price in excess of $100 per ton. Over the next 6 months, probably. That's probably the most dynamic on a downside. Potash prices could eke up a little bit, but they're probably largely range bound. And there's still too much stickiness in the phosphate market really to see too much dynamic there, I think.
And Taylor says farmers have to remember that one slight change on the global market can inject chaos into the entire inputs market.
Where you see an ability to lock in profit and take risk off the table, you should take a decent amount of that, because everything that I have just said could be blown out of the water with the strike of a pen or a geopolitical event.
Farmers are looking at critical decisions for 2025, and Hoffman says it's so important for farmers to get back to the basics.
And number one, do a crop budget. Look at all those input costs and look at reasonable selling prices for those commodities. Look what that looks like. All those extra things that we've added to the tank when we had $5 plus corn. Ask yourself real hard, are you sure we're getting a good economic return to those types of products? And if you are, put it in the tank. But if you're not, this is the year to maybe just stick with the basics and leave those things out.
And Taylor says when it comes to tariffs, he thinks the potash market is the most vulnerable to price increases. He says the U.S. gets 85 to 90% of our potash from imports from Canada. The rest comes from Russia and Israel. Well, Taylor is just one of many great speakers we have lined up for Top Producer Summit this year. Registration closes on January 21st, so you're running out of time to sign up for the 2025 Top Producer Summit. You can do that with the QR code on your screen. Well, speaking of tariffs, so what is the latest on tariff talk? We'll cover that in Ag Around the World next. Now for a glimpse at Ag Around the World. There's already plenty of chatter around President-elect Trump's plans for tariffs. But now Bloomberg is reporting Mr. Trump's team is studying gradual tariff hikes aimed at strengthening negotiating leverage while mitigating the impact of inflation.
The report says members of his economic team are considering tariff increases of 2 to 5% per month adding that the proposal is in its early stages and has not yet been presented to Mr. Trump. But also this week, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Trump held a phone call on Friday. The two leaders discussed trade, fentanyl, TikTok, and other pressing issues. Tensions between the countries are expected to rise as Trump has appointed critics of China, such as Senator Marco Rubio, as Secretary of State, signaling a potentially confrontational stance.
We're continuing to keep watch on South America's crops, and now Brazil's agricultural reporting agency is raising its estimates for the 2025 soybean crop. CONAB releasing its forecast for the 2024-25 season as harvest gets underway. The agency actually raising soybean production 110,000 metric tons from last month to 166.3 million metric tons. That's still below most private forecasts for the crop. And for the first time in nearly 40 years, Germany is dealing with an outbreak of foot and mouth disease. It was confirmed in a herd of water buffalo on the outskirts of Berlin. The disease causes fever along with mouth blisters in animals, including cattle, swine, sheep, and goats. German officials say they are taking steps to contain it. The illness does not pose a danger to humans, but they can transmit it. Officials say affected animals have already been euthanized. That's a glimpse of ag around the world. Well, what is it going to take to move these markets even higher? Market analysts keep saying it's a production problem either here or in Brazil. But what if that production problem is actually already here? That's Chip's Corner next.
Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. This weekend, Chip Flory joining us. Chip, we had Brian Grady on the roundtables this week, and I know you have worked with Brian Grady for a number of years. Listen, I asked him.
Almost 30 years.
Almost 30 years. Okay, so you go way back. You know each other really well. Brian isn't always, rosy, hey, bullish on the markets, but I asked him, now with the changes in USDA report, does he think $5 corn is possible? Chip, he said yes. He said yes. He called the report a game changer for the corn market. I mean, do you agree?
I do agree. And Brian is he's kind of a prove it guy. He's always looking for the evidence that is going to prove that a market can make a sustained move. And, let's face it, we've already had the July contract to within a dime of $5. We're working in that direction, and it's not going to be a straight up market. There's no question about that. There's going to be some choppiness. There's going to be volatility in it. But it's those January 10th reports, Tyne, that you mentioned that brought the volatility into the market. Leading up to January 10th, I had guest analyst after guest analyst on AgriTalk saying that, listen, it's going to take a production problem someplace, somewhere to fix what is wrong with the corn and soybean markets. In other words, we were going to have to tighten up the supply side of the balance sheet significantly to brighten the price outlook for corn and soybeans. Guys, we may be looking at the production problem in the rearview mirror. We've got a national average corn yield that is a record. It is a record national average corn yield, but it's below 180 bushels per acre. And then we're under 51 bushels per acre for the national average soybean yield. Those changes tightened up the supply side of the balance sheet enough that we may have already had the production problem. It's behind us, not in front of us. So now, where does that take us? Now the market's got to provide a lot of incentives and direction to producers to make the right decisions when it comes to acres for the 2025 growing season.
Jim, I hadn't thought about it that way because you're right. I mean, the analysts that we have on our show kept talking about we need a production problem somewhere. We need a production problem somewhere. We always hope it's not in the U.S. or it's not in our backyard, right? We always hope that. But like you said, maybe that production problem now is in the rearview mirror. Fascinating.
It's already happened.
Yeah. Chip, thank you so much. You can catch him twice a day for AgriTalk AM and AgriTalk PM. All right, when we come back, it's a remarkable story of an individual that migrated to the U.S. and just so happens to now be a barn hero. Clinton Griffiths has his story next.
Watch Markets Now with Michelle Rourke on the Farm Journal YouTube channel, keeping you updated throughout the day on the markets at the open, midday, and close. Find out what moved the markets today and what to expect the market to do next.
Born in Mexico, Jamie Sanchez moved to the U.S. at a very young age. He had no experience working with animals before starting to work at a hog farm in Michigan. But he proved to be a fast learner, and it was his curiosity and genuine interest in understanding why, which quickly set him apart. Those traits and characteristics have helped him find success, as Clinton Griffiths shows us this weekend with Barn Heroes.
Jamie Sanchez does a little bit of everything at Rolling Meadow Farms in Jones, Michigan.
A little bit of plumbing, a little bit of electrician, a little bit of welding, fixing. So yes, I do a little bit of everything besides that managing part.
As the barn manager, he and his crew care for 1,500 sows and their babies.
The traits that I look for in a caregiver to work here is compassion towards animals, making sure that they are going to take care of them as they were theirs.
It's work he's been doing since he was 19. Growing up in San Miguel, Michoacan, Mexico, Sanchez had no experience working with animals before taking this job.
He's worked here for over 20 years. He's started as the low man on the totem pole and worked his way up to managing our sow unit.
Today, he's a critical part of the farm's operation.
I think Jamie does a great job of working well with others. I think his personality and his demeanor makes it easy to work with people, makes it easier for people to work with him.
Try to have a positive attitude every day, teach them as much as I can what I know, and just try and tell them there's more just than what they're doing now, so they, keep moving up in the industry and positions.
A passion for people, animals, and for learning.
Just be humble and then learn. Never stop learning. Never stop caring for this type of work. And with a lot of work and a lot of patience, you can accomplish a lot.
And there's plenty to accomplish, as each month has its own rhythm. Week 1, cleaning. Week 2, new babies arrive. Week 3, health checks. And week 4, maintenance.
I mean, it's not like every day's sunshine and roses. We've worked through difficult times and challenges and new roles, but he's always been willing to learn. He's always been willing to make improvements.
I like doing what I do, it feeds a lot of people because we work every day, no matter what holiday comes on during the week.
It's his dedication to the job that makes him a true barn hero.
It's really nice to be acknowledged at doing what I do and be noticed.
I think sometimes we don't look back at where we've started and where we are now. He cares about his job. He's trained new employees. He works well with others, cares about the animals, cares about the whole scope of this farm and what it takes to get pigs to your plate.
From his first days on the job to being the leader and vital manager at the farm, Sanchez is still growing and passionate about the work he's doing, regardless of the task.
Thanks, Clinton. Well, up next, we're off to Florida to take you to a botanical garden that's unlike anything else, because with this botanical garden, you can actually eat what you see. That's on From the Farm next.
Be part of the live audience in San Antonio at the 2025 NCBA Cattle Convention. Don't miss U.S. Farm Report host Tyne Morgan's live taping with industry experts February 5th at noon.
Well, botanical gardens across the country attract thousands of people each year, but there's only one botanical garden made up entirely of food, allowing people to actually eat what they see. It's called the Fruit and Spice Park in Dade County, Florida. We got a first-hand look at it this week during Farm Journal's GoPex event, which is focused on produce. And as you can see, this botanical garden is truly one of a kind, spanning across 37 acres. So what exactly do they grow here? Well, it's 500 varieties of fruits, vegetables, spices, herbs, and nuts from around the world. That includes 150 varieties of mango and 75 different varieties of bananas, as well as other exotic edibles. But with bananas, it actually takes 18 months to 3 years to grow those. There are up to 60 varieties of bananas that you can eat, but some you actually can't consume.
And it's pretty easy to tell whether a banana is edible or not. These big red flowers. If the flowers are pointing downwards, like these ones are, that means the bananas, when they ripen, are going to be edible. This is called bixa. The seeds on the inside are called achote or annatto. So you don't eat it. Take the fruits, pop it open. There's little red seeds on the inside. You squish those seeds. Back in the 50s and 60s, used to make all the lipstick and makeup in America. Today, it's still used for all the food coloring. So if you ever get like those peanut butter crackers, that has this in it. Most cheeses in the store have this in it.
We were able to tag along for that tour. And what's interesting about these tours, that during the tour, if there's any fruits or nuts that have dropped on the ground, those are fair game to eat. That's all the time we have this weekend. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to tune in next weekend as we work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.